Three, two, one. Hey yo, what's good, y'all? It's your boy Lou, man. We clocked out. It's lunchtime. Got my pasta and broccoli on deck. Finna get into some videos, man. This one is called what's this shit called? How the CIA uses music as the most powerful weapon ever created. Let's get into it.
The relationship between the State Department and CIA and the music industry, I sort of started in the 1940s with jazz diplomacy. This was this period where the World War II had just ended, and we are now in a fight for geopolitical control over all the different neutral countries in the world against the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union has this communist government, and they're making appeals to Africa, among other places, saying that the capitalist society in the West is racist, they're discriminating against black people, there's all this class injustice, so African countries should sign economic partnerships with the Soviet Union. They should have their governments be more in line with the Soviet Union because they're more egalitarian. And so this was a lot of how the J. Edgar Hoover FBI was sort of calling a lot of folks who were pro-civil rights. They were calling them communists and Soviets because the Soviet Union was amplifying these kind of, there's racial discrimination against African-American, stuff on their own media channels. And so in Africa, what the State Department did is it took, who were very popular at the time, these black jazz musicians, Louis Armstrong and the like, and would fly them as essentially music diplomats to Africa, and making the point to African diplomats and African civil society organizations that actually the West does not discriminate, the Soviets are wrong. And so you had these musical ambassador types of being flown around by, on taxpayer dime. And then with classical music around the same time, the CIA starts something called the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which is this big arts and literature and music hub. It's basically hundreds of poets, musicians, thought leaders in the art space, in the culture space, in the music space. Gloria Steinem was a part of that with the feminist movement. But among that were classical musicians. So at the time, Shostakovich and these kind of Russian classical composers were seen to be superior to like Western classical musicians. And so even in the classical music hub, the CIA organizes these conferences through the musical conferences, musical exchanges, musical concerts in Rome, in Paris, in Germany.
Man, I hate broccoli, bro.
This CIA-funded cutout, the Congress for Cultural Freedom, in order to show that actually Western classical music is, competes on par and is better than Russian classical music. And then you had the whole rock and roll movement, where you had this export to essentially behind the Iron Curtain. You had this anti-authoritarian, challenging the government, rock music space. And a lot of this stuff was sponsored by the U.S. government, sponsoring rock concerts by the Berlin Wall to try to, show that we're against the big government of the Soviet Union and against Big Brother. Then you had this in the rap space. You mentioned Cuba. So in the early 2000s, the CIA, USAID, the State Department really began to turn attention to the rap and hip hop space as it achieved this kind of cultural saturation, and did this in a bunch of countries. So a very famous one is this group called the San Isidro Collective in Cuba. In 2009, this CIA cutout called the National Endowment for Democracy, it was conceived of by the CIA director in 1983. The CIA gets a copy of every single grant that they give. This was disclosed in 1986 in the Washington Post. Its founder says, we were created because the CIA used to get in trouble in the 1960s and 70s. I'm sorry, groups seen as subsidized by the CIA were scandalized by that. So our endowment, NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, was set up so that we could fund the groups that the CIA though they'd be too scandalized to get from the CIA. Meanwhile, the
Right.
CIA gets a copy of every single one of their grants, so it's just an empty cutout for it. So in 2009, they write this memo. They have this in-house journal called the Journal of Democracy. We pay for it as taxpayers. And in this 2009 memo, they're talking about how their attempts at regime change in Cuba have been unsuccessful, and they should try a more targeted Afro-Cuban strategy, because the Afro-Cuban population is actually is higher, I think, than it's like the highest, most popular demographic in Cuba, and yet they're underrepresented in the Cuban government, and there are grievances that can be inflamed in Cuba on that basis. And they did this demographic survey. Again, this is a CIA cutout doing this, and they say, okay, well, the Afro-Cuban population is disproportionately unemployed, prone to using drugs, and has cultural salience communicated through rap and hip hop music. A year later, they begin funding together with USAID. So it's USAID, which is a giant CIA money funnel, plus the CIA's effectively proprietary cutout.
Random fact. USAID. The only reason I know that is because when you type in Lucid, once you get past all of my shit in Google or whatever, USAID comes after that. Random fact.
In funneling money and aid to this rap collective called the San Isidro Movement, who pens this anthem about taking to the streets to rebel against the government. At the same time, USAID sets up a fake Twitter in Cuba. It's called Zunzanillo. This is a big scandal where humanitarian funds were earmarked for Pakistan by USAID, and then they were diverted through Cayman Islands banks to set up a Twitter knockoff. Because in 2009, 2010, this is when the Arab Spring was going on.
Right.
So you had these CIA social media revolutions, and so they wanted to bring a Cuban Spring there. So they have these insider documents that end up leaking a couple years later, where they say that the goal is to attract people, because Cuba at the time had banned Twitter, and so they wanted to make this look like this was by Cubans for Cubans. So USAID got these two unsuspecting business executives to set up this Twitter knockoff. The plan was, according to the USAID documents, to attract them by advertising a social media website that would emphasize sports, music, and hurricane updates. And then once they hit 100,000 subscribers, they would switch to anti-government political messaging. And so this group, by the way, the San Isidro Movement, and their anthem they penned to try to get people to take to the streets in a color revolution, you can still see odes to this in Art Basel in Miami. I live in Miami. That you still see this. Miami was the biggest CIA hub for the whole Cold War. There was the station JM Wave, the Miami station, was the largest CIA hub in the world. And because Miami was so close to, it's giant port city, and it's the Caribbean, it's Central America, you get the South America tip. So anyway, even today in 2024, the Biden administration overthrew the government of Bangladesh. They did so in part through Ned grants, this CIA cutout, grants to Bangladeshi hip hop artists. And even these documents leaked where Ned actually wrote back to the State Department that they funded these two rap and hip hop videos that were designed to get people to take to the streets, to sow distrust in government, to inflame tensions between the youth and unemployed people and the government not serving them. And the Biden administration at the same time opened up this brand new center called the Global Music Diplomacy Bureau within the State Department. And the State Department is what coordinates CIA and USAID. So I think in 2024, they brought 22 rap and hip hop artists from 14 different countries for a 3-day training session at the State Department. They're training them how to mobilize youth, how to get people to the streets. And this is another big thing with these concerts. They simulate street mobilization.
Right.
When you get all these people together in the street, you get them in the practice of taking to the street, and they put aside all the differences they might have with each other on grievance grounds. Like, for example, the there was an underground rock scene that the CIA and State Department worked with in Yugoslavia in the 1990s when they were backing something called the Otpor movement, which is kind of the origins of this like iron fist for all these color revolutions. And what the whole purpose is, you're the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You have all these groups who don't necessarily like each other, but when they are infighting, they can't form a unified front to win an election or to rally behind like an opposition candidate who will take the place of the leadership. So having the backdrop for organizing being music everyone likes rather than abortion, when half of the people might not, have religious differences, so they might not want to organize about that. Or, tax policy, when half of the people you might want to recruit are business owners and the like. Or, energy policy, when half of the people might like cheap fossil fuels, half of the people might like, renewable energy. Mm-hmm. But the music cuts through all of that. We're all together. We have one thing in common, which is that we hate this government. But now we're all marching together. We're all in the streets together. We're all vibing to the same music. And so, you see this all the time. And this is also another thing, like Bono, for example, who's been kind of my bête noire on some of this USAID stuff, because Bono's out here talking about how USAID has, the cuts to USAID have killed 300,000 people so far. And it's like,
did he say that?
He did. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's citing this Boston University study, which is complete garbage. Even in the study itself, it's like, well, we don't count duplicate deaths. So theoretically, if someone dies from dysentery, AIDS, Ebola, SARS.
Man, this sounds a lot like how music is pushed in America anyway. It feels like they got the program down pat here, and now they're using it on a global scale. And when I say that, I mean, there's always been rumors and conspiracy theories about, what music gets pushed and what music is successful in America, mostly, negative things with negative tones, violence, drug use, all that type of shit, and how that gets pushed down to our kids and all these other all these other different negative intents that the higher ups, what I'm saying, might have to keep us under control or to train us or, keep us in a mindset of survival mode and how to mobilize and this and that, you know what I'm saying? And money gets behind certain artists who make certain types of music, you know what I mean? And these people ain't dumb. The artists ain't dumb, some of them. Some people are so brainwashed in the system, they make music that perpetuates their future in a negative way because they keep talking about negativity in the present. You know what I'm saying? I did this, I'm gonna do this. If you know what I'm saying? All this type of shit. And then you see that play out in people's lives and shit. But that's not necessarily their fault. That's how they were conditioned from children, you know what I'm saying? All this shit, not to get too deep into it, but he ain't really saying nothing new. The only difference is it's the CIA that's doing it, so it's foreign, doing it to other people. But if they're doing it to other people, you think they ain't doing it to us? Shit. That's what marketing is and advertising. You know what I'm saying? It's all a human psychology chess match to get people to do things without them knowing that you got them to do it with intention. You know what I'm saying? It gets deep, you know what I'm saying? But it's only the lunch break. We ain't got that much time. I don't even really care what the hell he got to say after this, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut it here. Till next time, man. I gotta go clock in. You feel me? Peace.